This might be a controversial one. Hello, citizens of the internet. It is I, your local queer xenocyte. Before I get into today's topic, I just want to mention that I don't know how makeup works, but I mean, black lipstick looks good on me. I don't know, I felt like I needed to put that out there. I look good in black lipstick, and if anyone says otherwise, well, they're wrong objectively. I'm really radiating genderless vibes right now. Just like a lot of like NB feels coming from me right now. And I'm living for it. Today, we're going to be talking about Cyberpunk 2077 and why I personally don't think the game itself is as bad as the internet makes it out to be. And I understand I may have my own biases because I didn't have a terrible experience of the game and I played it on PC, but I still feel like, you know, my opinion, I feel like putting my opinion out there. This is my channel where I talk about things I'm passionate about, and I am passionate on this. As of time of recording, the game's been out for around 2 weeks roughly, and I've played almost 100 hours of the game, I think. So I'm well versed in the experience that is Cyberpunk 2077. So I feel like I'm not completely talking out of my asshole. Now, I'm not going to talk about any spoilers here because I do want people to play this game. I too long didn't read. I like this game and I think it's a good game, so if you can play it, you should play it, so I'm not going to spoil it. Cyberpunk 2077 is a game that's been in the making for about 7 years now, when CD Projekt Red dropped their first teaser trailer of the game, and I will go out and say it is still one of the best teaser trailers I have seen for a game as of yet. It is a really good teaser trailer, especially for its time as well. Since then, the hype and anticipation of this game has grown and grown to exponential levels, with many people expecting the perfect Cyberpunk game that would revolutionize and change gaming as we know it. Cyberpunk 2077 was put on this godly pedestal, and the developers at CD Projekt Red was seen as like the messiah who was about to bring the second coming of Jesus. And Jesus is Cyberpunk 2077. To say people were excited for this game is a complete and utter understatement. People were shitting themselves in anticipation. People had already played this game thousands of times in their mind long before even the release date was announced. So of course, when the game did come out, many fans were inevitably disappointed. Now, don't get me wrong, there are certainly valid criticisms of this game, and I will get to those in a bit. But we also should not pretend that some of the criticisms that are on the internet, at least that I have seen, are valid, and instead just come from a place of hating things because they're popular and because it's just a bunch of dude bros who are mad because you can't fuck Judy Alvarez. Now, I've been looking forward to this game for 7 years, since the drop of the first teaser trailer. So it's fair to say that I've done my waiting. I did my waiting! 7 years in anticipation. But I knew not to overhype the game for myself. I know what it's like to overhype something to impossible standards that when it does inevitably come out, you're met with disappointment. Or worse, it actually sucks. There was a very real chance that Cyber 2077 would drop and it would be just a garbage fire pit of completely shittery and just a terrible, awful, bad game and bad experience. It's just absolute dog shit. So I didn't stock everything into it. I didn't put all my eggs in one basket of this game. I didn't hype it up to impossible standards for myself. I didn't go into the game thinking it would be godly and it would revolutionize gaming as it is and, you know, bow down and kiss its feet. I went in the game thinking it would be a good, fun game. I knew I would have some enjoyment in it somewhere. And I was pleasantly surprised. I was more than just having some fun and enjoying the game. It was a very good experience to play. It was a great game for me personally. You know, there are aspects of the game that are just phenomenal. The graphics are just jaw-dropping. It's phenomenal. Honestly, I can't even fathom how good the graphics are in this game. This game is a beautiful game. It is pretty as fuck. honestly, you could even say that this game has sort of created now a benchmark of standards for graphics in future games, at least for AAA games. You know, you can see like individual pores in the skin of your character. You can see the veins of NPCs. You know, it's so... it's fucking mind-blowing. Mind-blowing, these graphics are. It's utterly mind-blowing. I have a screenshot of this game that I took in the game's photo mode as my wallpaper right now, because it's just that beautiful. You can really just pause in the game, take a moment, and really capture the scenery, and it's breathtaking. On top of the graphics, also, the soundtrack is phenomenal. Honestly, like even if you have no interest in playing the game, at least listen to the soundtrack. It is a good soundtrack. Marcin Przebojowicz really outdid himself since the Witcher 3 soundtrack. And P.T. Adamczyk and Paul Leonard Morgan also did a phenomenal job in their parts of the soundtrack too. I really like P.T. Adamczyk's Mining Mines and Rite of Passage personally. It truly is an amazing soundtrack that captures the emotional, the serious, the action-packed, and just the fun moments of the game when the respective scenes come up for the correlating soundtrack. It is fantastic. On top of the soundtrack and the graphics, the world also felt alive. And I know there's some conflict of opinions on that point, but in my experience, when I played the game, it felt rich with life. You really could go to the different suburbs, different neighborhoods, and you can feel how capitalism affects each person in their respective districts. You know, you've got the city center that's filled with the elite and the corpos and the rich, and you can see it in the architecture of the buildings, the way how the people are dressed in that area, just that the overall vibe in the city center. You can tell that that's where the rich reside. And then you go to like Santo Domingo, and it's filled with people who are really struggling under capitalism. You know, you've got issues with gangs, but also just poverty in general. And then you go to Pacifica, and Pacifica has just been utterly abandoned because it's just so fucked.
Pacifica is still Pacifica.
I really enjoyed the story. I loved the story. I loved the characters in the story. I really love, you know, Judy. Johnny Silverhand I hate him, but I love him as well. He's a really good character, but he's also the worst. And Takamura is like my best friend. He's my best friend. No one can take that away from me. The NPCs in the story of Cyberpunk 2077 are so good because they're not perfect. You know, so many of them have flaws. Especially Johnny Silverhand is riddled with flaws. I know some people said that, you know, the story is very quick, or, you know, the characters were quite boring, but I find that really hard to believe for someone to play the game and come out of it with that. Like, unless you didn't do the side missions. And I mean, sure, maybe some people could say like, oh, but that's dumb, they have to do side missions. But the game heavily encourages you to do side missions, really. You get so much of the story and the world and the characters through the side missions. If you want the best experience in the story of Cyberpunk, do the side quests. It encourages you to. There are literally points where it'll just say, wait. Do other things while waiting. And it's such a long time for Takamura to fucking get back to you. So of course, with all of this in mind, these were my experiences playing the game. I really enjoyed the game. There was so much I really loved about it, from the graphics to the world to the story and the characters. Like, it was a really enjoyable game for me. So when I hopped on the internet, I was very surprised to see the backlash and the criticisms of the game. And there are certainly some criticisms I can wholeheartedly agree with. You know, I think certainly the romance aspect of this game is quite lackluster. You know, you've only got 4 romance options, and depending on your combination of like your body type and your voice type, that really narrows down to just 2. And the biggest part of the romance option that I think was really lacking was, why the fuck can't we romance Takamura? I want to fuck Takamura. CD Projekt Red are a bunch of cowards for not allowing us, the players, to get to fuck Goro Takamura. I think also the character creation was a bit meh, at least it felt a bit meh to me. especially when it comes to, you know, the trans inclusivity. I can see they tried. I can see they really tried to be trans inclusive, and I won't say that it was god awful, but I think there was some parts that could have been improved. You know, I think it is cool that, you know, the genitals of your player they're separate from the body type. You know, you can have a male body type but a vagina if you wanted, or female body type but a penis. You know, I think that is cool. And I think also the voice is separate from your body type as well. You know, you can have a feminine voice with a male body type. But I think what was really poorly executed was the fact that they had the pronouns tied in with your voice tone. So if you had a feminine voice tone, you used she, her pronouns. I personally think they would have done much better if they had separated the pronouns entirely once again. So you can choose your body type, your voice tone, your genitals, and your pronouns. None of them are linked to each other or correlate with each other at all. I think that would have been cool. And then the romance options are just based on whatever they prefer. Like Judy Alvarez just prefer people who use she, her pronouns. And, you know, Kerry Eurodyne prefers he, him pronouns. And River and Panem are just pan as fuck, I guess. You know, I think that would have been better. But I don't want to hate on them too much for that either, because Cyberpunk 2077 is literally like the first like role-playing game that is as trans-inclusive as it is with the character creation process. So it's like, at the very least, I can tell they tried. It's not the best, but hopefully this is like a stepping stone for future RPGs to be better. Also, FYI, CD Projekt Red, I personally would really love it if you add they, them pronouns. But that's just me personally, and you know, it's not game breaking, but I would like they, them pronouns, please, thanks. What does irk me with the character creation is once you're done with the character creation, that's it. You can't edit your hair at some barber, or, you know, go see a beauty therapist to change your makeup or anything like that. The only thing you can edit from there on is your clothes. And I just find it weird that, you know, we live in this cyberpunk city where appearance is everything, and yet you can't edit your hair, you can't see a plastic surgeon to change everything you look, which I think would be very fitting in a cyberpunk world, that, you know, plastic surgery is just so easily accessible and probably kind of affordable too, because as I said, appearance is everything. And I do hope that some of the things like, you know, barber, plastic surgeon and such like that, I do hope that those things will be introduced in a later patch or something. I do hope that we do see something like that eventually. I'm trying not to hold my breath on it. And none of those things are by any means game breaking. They are just minor things that it's like, hey, these things would help add to the experience of Cyberpunk 2077 and be more immersive to the world. But to address the clear elephant in the room, obviously there are problems with the game on the console. You know, there are bugs, glitches, game-breaking bugs and glitches and moments that just make the game essentially unplayable. The game is nowhere near optimized, polished, or ready for the console at all. And I do agree that that is definitely a valid thing to criticize and even be angry about as a console player. I think that releasing the game well before it was ready, as I did, was quite irresponsible on CD Projekt Red's behalf. But I do also think this situation is a bit more dicey and complicated than, oh, CD Projekt Red released, it's bad, it's all their fault. You know, I've seen a lot of people say that the game should have been delayed again. And don't get me wrong, I wholeheartedly agree. I think they should have given it another year or so. You know, like, I've already waited 7 years, I can wait another year. But let's be real here. Last time they delayed the game, which was back in November, they got dogpiled on. The internet, the backlash was cruel. You know, people were just utterly decimating CD Projekt Red for delaying it, like, I think an extra week or two, you know, to do finalizing and polishing and optimizing and such like that. Like, they got decimated for delaying it that third time. So it's like, I kind of get why they didn't delay it, because last time they did, it was not received well. And personally, I think some of the people crying that the game should have been delayed, some of them are probably the same people who cried when it did get delayed. So it's like, it's a lose-lose situation there. What's particularly interesting is that the developers have even come forward since its release and stated that they didn't even want to release the game. They knew it wasn't ready, but it was the pressure from the executives to release it there.
Hey, this is Xenocide in the editing process. I realized I made an oopsie when I said the developers came forward and stated they did not want to release the game. That isn't entirely accurate, and I don't want to misrepresent what happened. According to a transcript of an internal meeting, what occurred was the management board admitted they were too focused on just releasing the game and ignored signals about the need for additional time to refine the game on base last-gen consoles. So the executives ignored the developers' requests for more time and ongoing issues of the game's performance on last-gen consoles because they wanted to avoid a fourth delay and just release the game. So now we're clear on that. Okay, back to video Xenocide.
So with the fans demanding them to hurry up and release it, and with the executives demanding to hurry up and release it, the developers were essentially pushed into a corner. They had no choice but to release it in that regard, and it was just, as I said, a lose-lose situation for them. If they release it, they're releasing a game before it's ready, and people are going to be mad about that. But if they don't release it and delay it again, people are going to be mad that it's delayed again. What do you do at that point, you know? I personally believe that the game should have been PC exclusive, or at the very least, the console release should have been pushed back. Like, release it on PC and then release it on the console a little after it gets more polishing and optimization, like a later release for the consoles. But obviously, that would have created its own set of controversy and drama, both amongst fans and executives. You know, the console fans would be rioting in the streets. They'd grab their pitchforks, their torches, they'll be smashing shit up. And the executives would be very pissed off because they want the, you know, profits and the money from releasing a game on console, because there's money to be had in console release. I've also seen some people say that the game should have just been optimized for last gen like consoles and graphic cards and such. Basically just downscale the quality so that, you know, older gen can run it. And I kind of think that's just a bit stupid. If they have the funding and the ability to optimize this game's graphics to like the best of its fucking ability, and they have, the game is fucking stunning. But if they have that sort of funding and ability, why the fuck would you discourage them from doing that? Like, seriously, how entitled do you have to be as a person to demand these developers to, you know, bail out on some quality of the graphics so that your PS4 can run it? Like, that's very entitled and kind of shitty. Like, don't get me wrong, it sucks when there's a game you want to play but you can't play it because you don't have the hardware for it, or your hardware's too dated. Trust me, I'm poor. I rely on welfare. The only reason why I'm able to even afford to play Cyberpunk 2077 is because my country's COVID supplements that's been happening for like a year, or 6-8 months or so. That's the only reason why. If it weren't for that, I wouldn't have a computer right now. I played Overwatch on 10 FPS on my laptop like a couple years ago. I wanted to play Dead by Daylight on the same laptop and it only ran 5 FPS. Both those games were essentially unplayable on my laptop. That doesn't mean the game's bad or the developers are bad because they didn't have my laptop specs in mind when creating the game. They were just trying to create the best possible game that they could with the funding and the ability at the time, you know? It's not the game's fault that your hardware is too dated or that your console is from like last gen. It's not the developer's fault. It is not the game's fault. It's not even your fault. It's capitalism's fault. Look, the sad reality is, as time goes on and technology improves, especially amongst gaming, consoles are just going to become obsolete. There are consoles that will be obsolete, there are graphics cards that will be obsolete as these things get upgraded over time. That's the sad reality. And if you're going to demand and expect CD Projekt Red to, you know, optimize their game for PS4 as opposed to the newer gen and, you know, the newer gen graphics cards and consoles, then why don't they optimize it for the PS3 gamers, you know? Why didn't Bungie think of the Xbox original players when they released Halo 3 on the Xbox 360? It's stupid. What I'm saying is that in regards to the console situation of Cyberpunk 2077, there are certainly fault to be had on the developers for not spending enough time during crunching to optimize and polish the game for console, and for withholding information about its performance on the console leading up to the release. I think a lot of it also falls onto the fault of toxic gamers who are crying about how unplayable it is on the console. They're the same toxic gamers who cried when the game got delayed back in November. They're the same toxic gamers who put an impossible standard of this game onto the developers, basically putting so much pressure on them to deliver such a perfect game, which forces them to crunch and work absolute overtime to make sure the game is utterly perfect. But not just the toxic gamers who do that. A lot of the fault also falls upon the executives who forced these developers to crunch in the first place. You know, put so much stress and pressure onto these developers for the past year, working 6 days a week, over 100 hours a week, leading up to the release of this game. Literally forcing the developers to release the game before it was ready so that it could be released before Christmas and they could cash in on Christmas sales. Executives don't give a fuck about the quality of the game. They just care about how much money they'll make off it. And another thing to think about is Cyberpunk 2077 isn't the only game to have a release like this. You remember Fallout 76? That game was riddled with bugs and glitches and so many problems. My point is there's an overarching problem in the gaming industry right now. It's not a Cyberpunk 2077 problem. It's not a CD Projekt Red problem. It is a problem in the gaming industry, particularly in regards to crunching and meeting deadlines and release dates at any cost. To the point of, as we've seen with Cyberpunk, but also Fallout 76, Sims 4 releasing games before they are ready to prevent delaying. Partially because of the toxic players who cry in the streets when their game is delayed, and partially because executives just want to hurry up and release the game so they can get their buck. The gaming industry is slowly falling into a mass-producing trap, where there's less focus on quality and more focus on the profit of the game. We need to stop normalizing crunching, especially leading up to a release date. And I feel like we need to start normalizing, lax release dates. And I think that isn't just up to us to do, but we should pressure the executives to just get off the developers' backs, To not sound super pretentious, but games, like any other media format, is a form of art, and you don't rush art. If you cut corners, make compromises, rush your creative process and your art process, you're not going to come out with a quality piece of art. You're going to come out with a messy, incomplete, clearly rushed product. By giving developers patience and more flexible release dates, it will prevent crunching and stress on the developers, and therefore the end product will be better. It'll be better quality. It will prevent games upon release from being very buggy and glitchy. CD Projekt Red developers were essentially backed into a corner where no matter what they did, whether it was delay it, make it a PC exclusive, or release it before it was ready, which that part they did, fans were going to be mad, people were going to be mad on the internet, and executives still get to walk to the bank, cash in their profit, and walk out with a whole bunch of money in their pockets as they throw the developers under the bus. Because at the end of the day, this game was hyped to impossible standards, and people were sick of waiting for the game. And look, while it does suck that a game is essentially unplayable for you, it genuinely sucks. Trust me, I know how that feels. It sucks, it's shit. I just also think it isn't really it's just the developer's fault for doing this. I think it's a bit more nuanced than that. I think it is a critique at toxic gamers and the pressure they put on developers. I think it should also we should also consider in mind of the climate of the gaming industry as a whole right now, and crunching developers, putting all this pressure on them, how it's no longer really just a let's release a good game, it's just more so of a let's release a game at a certain part of the year because we know that's how we're going to get a lot of money. I think fans should have been more patient. I think fans should have not overhyped the game for themselves and for the community as a whole. I think the most important point though is that executives are a bunch of corpo rats and we should just burn their shit to the ground. I do also think that ultimately, even if this game was perfect in literally every way, if it was just the most perfect piece of gaming ever, there were still going to be people who are going to hate on it. There are still going to be people who will find something wrong with it then shit on the internet about. And that's where I'm going to lead into a critique I saw on the internet that is just so dumb. It makes me want to punch my monitor and then smash my head into my desktop because it's just that stupid. You see, I've seen people complain that this game is cop-propaganda, also known as cop propaganda, and that if you like this game, you're a bootlicker and a cyber simp. Well, hand me a boot and call me a cyber simp because I fucking loved this game. It's just it boggles my mind that someone came to that conclusion. Did you play the same game as me? Did we play the same game? I feel like you did not play Cyberpunk 2077. I think you just played True Crime Streets of LA instead. And that's an Xbox original game, so I don't know how you got them confused. At no point of the game are cops ever glorified. There's no point in the game where I've sat there and I felt that cops were being glorified or romanticized in any way, shape or form. If anything, it is clearly stated that cops only care for the elite, are super corrupt, and the few good cops that are in the force inevitably leave because either they're sick of the corruption and they don't want anything to do with it, or they're trying to expose the corruption and now have a target on their heads and either wind up dead in an alleyway or have to fucking flee for their lives. I saw some people use a gig that appears very early game as an example, where you have this lady who's trying to expose these corrupt cops who are her colleagues, and you're specifically hired to convince her not to expose the cops because the cops know what she's trying to do and they want her dead. They're actively planning on killing her. And depending on the choices you make, she either decides to drop the case and, leave the force because she doesn't want her life to end, or she decides to try and expose them anyway, and not only doesn't end up exposing them, but also winds up dead in an alleyway. Now that doesn't scream cop propaganda to me. That screams, holy shit, the police are so corrupt that no one can stop them. They're free to do whatever the fuck they want because they have the money and power on their side. Just because you're not actively gutter stomping cops in the city, and honestly, nothing's stopping you from killing cops in the streets either. You can just go up to a cop and decapitate them if you want. But just because you're not actively gutter stomping cops in the city doesn't mean it's not cyberpunk. Blade Runner is seen as a movie that heavily influenced the cyberpunk genre with its stunning cinematography and the world of cyberpunk. And the main character is a cop who hunts and kills replicants. Ghost in the Shell is a classic cyberpunk anime that deals with the philosophical aspect of cyberpunk, of what it means to be human, and the protagonist, Motoko Kusanagi, is a federal agent, an authority figure, a cop. Are you telling me those two aren't cyberpunk? And if you're saying yes, I don't think you know what cyberpunk is. And I see people saying, oh, but you could do police bounties, that's glorifying them. And I mean, not really. Your character's a mercenary. You do any job to earn money because that's what it means to survive in this world. I find it quite fitting that in a dystopic world where the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and cops only serve the rich and elite, that they sort of expect lowly mercs like you to do the dirty work. They're too good for pleb work, like, killing a gang member because it stole some old lady's purse. They'll just hire a merc to do it for them, and then they'll just write up in the report that it was an arrest gone wrong and then call it a day. It's super corrupt. After all, in this city, money is how you survive. What are you willing to do in this capitalist hellscape where unless you can afford the private health insurance to get your body clean off the streets, no one would even care if you drop dead tomorrow in an alleyway? Are you willing to work with some dirty, corrupt cops and people, take their blood money in order to feed yourself and keep a roof over your head? Cyberpunk isn't about punching cops and saying fuck authority. It's anti-establishment. But ultimately, it's about capitalism, and when left unchecked, everything becomes capital gain. Down to your very own body, both in a sexual manner, but also in a very little manner of selling off body parts and replacing it with cybernetic implants and parts so that these companies can profit off you and your body, monitor you, spy on you, and collect your data, literally for their own gain too. It is a cautionary tale of capitalism gone absolutely wrong, but also too deep to really turn back now. When you sell your data off to companies, and these companies can monitor you literally through your eyes, how can you pull the brakes on capitalism? The anti-establishment aspect of Cyberpunk is heavily tied in with the anti-capitalism. The anti-authority aspect is merely just a symptom of the anti-establishment theme of Cyberpunk, as ultimately, kind of what we even see in the real world, authority figures will side with money and power over the people. And Cyberpunk 2077 nails that to the fucking T. The good cops refuse to allow themselves to shake hands with these corpses in their bloody hands, and so usually leave the force or wind up dead in an alleyway because they try to take on a massive corporation and corrupt cops who are okay with compromising their morality if it means surviving, putting food on the table with a roof over their head and earning that money. Those who stay on the force are most of the time very corrupt, power hungry, and extremely abusive because they know they can get away with it thanks to the corpo money in their pockets. And everyone knows they're horrible and corrupt, but you can't stop them, not without also taking on the massive conglomerate that's backing them up. You know, the same conglomerate who has enough money to, you know, buy a fucking army, private jets, space stations, you name it, they can buy it. They have all the money to do so. So no, this game is not cop propaganda. If anything, I really feel like it was a game we needed in this day and age. As we approach a point in capitalism where we either enter a post-capitalist stage, steering away from the extremities of capitalism gone wrong, or we go to a point of no return and enter this cyberpunk dystopia. This would look good. We need more games, more movies, more TV shows that explore these themes and explore these cautionary tales of capitalism, because games are like every other media, and media influences our ideas and society as a whole. Cyberpunk 2077 has its flaws, no doubt about that. I am not sitting here saying it is a perfect game by any means, but I also just don't think it is as bad as it's made out to be. I don't think it is this disaster of a game. I just think people enjoy hating on popular things or went into this game with very unrealistic expectations and was very disappointed that they did not have a godly religious experience while playing it. And in regards to the console problem, I think it is much easier for us to sit here and blame the developers for the fuck up that has been Cyberpunk 2077 on the console than reflect that maybe us gamers are part of the problem. Not solely the problem, the executives are the main chunk of the problem, but I do think we as gamers also play a part in these games being released in a rush and, you know, the crunching of the gaming industry, because we put these games on such high standards and we get so mad and entitled when they're delayed. But the true culprits are really the executives. The executives who push and demand the developers to release the game well before it's ready just so they can hurry up and make their money, and when it goes south they hide behind the developers and throw them under the bus. It is quite literally capitalism's fault that Cyberpunk 2077 was released before it was ready and it turned out as it did. It is literally capitalism's fault. Fight me on that. Am I wrong? No, I'm not. Look, at the end of the day, I feel like Cyberpunk 2077 is a really good game. If you look past the bugs and the glitches, at least on PC, I'm not going to talk on console because I haven't played on console, but on PC, it is a really good game if you get past the bugs and the glitches that they are patching up as we speak and are going to continue to patch up and make sure that the game is fully polished and optimized over the next coming few months. I think if you can look past that, that hides behind a really good game with a very interesting story and wonderful characters and a world that is so fascinating to immerse yourself into, because a part of it has this sort of semblance of what if this is our future? You know, there are parts of this game that genuinely spooks me. Just the little ads of real water costing $99 a gallon, or like, you know, the last koala going extinct, the last shark being extinct in 2067, and, you know, you can't eat organic meat because it could be toxic. Those parts of this game is what makes me feel like it's worth playing, because it is genuinely a really good experience if you can get past the bugs and glitches. So like, I don't know, don't let dude bros or party poopers prevent you or convince you to not play the game. I really think if you can play the game, if you have the hardware for it, I highly recommend give it a whirl, just give it a try, give it a chance. Just allow yourself to decide whether or not it is as bad as a game as everyone is making it out to be. Because I played it and I don't think it is nearly as bad as people make it out to be. I think it is a really great game, and if it didn't have the bugs and the glitches, it would be even better. Anyway, that is all for now. Sorry that this is going to be a big video. I just feel like there's a lot to cover here, and I want to talk a lot about my personal experience as well, just so it doesn't sound like I'm simping for no reason or something, you know? And also, I just really love Cyberpunk as a genre. As you can see, I did try to dress up a little bit cyberpunky. I really enjoyed the Cyberpunk genre, the aesthetic of it, the philosophy, the ideas, themes. Cyberpunk as a genre is a really good genre, and I feel like we need more of it. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, you know, leave a comment of your thoughts. If you want to see more content like this, of me just talking about whatever the fuck I want, when I want, feel free to subscribe. It's free. And if you don't like it, you can unsubscribe a little later on. You can follow me on Twitter at Xenocyte, and until next time, bye!